Recording in progress.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a critical mass.
Mr. Bibb isn't here.
Shall we wait then?
6:01, let's wait another minute.
Okay.
Neither is Mr. Simmons. Good evening, Mr. Bibb.
Can you see me okay? Great.
Well, let's go ahead and do the introductions and hope Mr. Simmons will arrive momentarily. All right. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Michael Scharf. I'm the co-dean of Case Western Reserve University School of Law. I am honored to be here today to welcome you to what I hope will be a discussion that is informative, constructive, and most of all, valuable to the voters assessing options for the city's next leader. While we still are early in the campaign season, one point already is inarguable. Voters have a lot of options, more than in any mayoral election in recent memory. I'm told this is the first time that the voters will have an opportunity to see all 8 candidates live at one time. Case Western Reserve University School of Law strives to be a community and national leader in social justice, and we are ranked 6th best law school in the nation in public interest law. So when Professor Lewis Katz let me know that the Cleveland Community Police Commission was interested in having our law school host a forum with the mayoral candidates about police reform, I was excited for this opportunity and anticipated that the subject would generate great interest. I just didn't know exactly how much that interest would grow right before the event, or that a member of our faculty would be a central part of the discussion. Today's forum is about the candidates' views, so I'm not going to detail all that happened since Professor Aisha Hardaway's June 14th letter explaining her resignation from the monitoring team. What I will say is that Professor Hardaway is an exceptional member of our faculty. She's recognized nationally for her expertise on issues involving race, policing, consent decrees, and civil rights. And she is a person of unquestionable integrity. I agree fully with Professor Katz's comment in the Plain Dealer the other day that Professor Hardaway's departure from the monitoring team is a loss to the city. And with CWRU's press statement on Monday, I'm also grateful for the praise that others in the community have offered regarding Professor Hardaway's expertise and dedication while on the monitoring team. A decade ago, Cleveland sustained 75 homicides in a single year. In 2020, that figure had grown to 177. This spring, officials reported that the city's murder rate is running even higher than last year's. Whoever becomes Cleveland's next mayor will have to put safety at the center of the agenda, which by extension makes effective and accountable policing a top priority. Well, I hope this evening's discussion is the first of many that the candidates will have on this important subject. And I thank everyone for being with us tonight. So now it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Professor Lewis Katz, a member of the Police Commission and a member of our faculty for over 52 years, who will moderate the discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dean Scharf. Welcome to the Cleveland Community Police Commission Mayoral Candidates Forum on Police Reform and the Consent Decree. We welcome those who are registered for the forum, and this webinar is also streaming live on WOVU 95.9 FM. Before we begin, let me explain why we are partnering with Case Western Reserve Law School. The Police Commission represents the Cleveland community and is the voice of the community within the consent decree. As is true of the community, we are too often ignored by the city. The city did not want this forum to take place tonight. They barred us from using the city WebEx and our own staff to prepare for this forum. You'll have to ask the law department for its reasons. We were stuck, and I emailed the co-deans of the law school to see if they would partner with the commission. Within 5 minutes of that request, Dean Scharf emailed an enthusiastic yes. The law school agreed to co-partner, made no demands on us, and made its resources available to help make this important forum a reality. We are on the university Zoom tonight, and I want to thank 4 people at Case who helped us get here. They are Martin Raska and Eric Seiler, who are running the webinar, Colin McEwen for media relations, and Ivana Herelia Valdivieso, whom I always rely on for too much help. So on to the forum. We are honored to have 7 of the 8 candidates for mayor of Cleveland with us tonight. Mr. Landry Simmons just emailed that he's unable to make it. This is a forum, not a debate. The candidates will be asked 11 questions. The questions are on police reform and the consent decree. The questions were provided to the candidates in advance so that they would have an opportunity to provide thoughtful answers to some of the most thorny problems this community faces. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. With 15 seconds left in the minute, Micah Jordan will hold up a 15-second sign alerting you that your time is almost over. I am joined tonight by Micah and Ivan Kennard, 2 members of the youth affiliated group called Leaders of Tomorrow, who are part of the Cleveland Police Commission. The candidates will be asked the questions in a random order, selected through using website random.org/list. I will read the order in which the candidates will answer the question after each question is asked. We cannot take questions from the audience, but this forum is for you, the voters, and the commission considers your questions and comments to be very important. Please place your questions and comments in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and the commission will either respond to you after the forum or pass your questions or comments on to the particular candidate. Now let's meet the candidates. In alphabetical order, I welcome attorney and community organizer Justin Bibb, attorney Ross DeBello, Cleveland City Councilman Bashir Jones, Cleveland City Council President Kevin Kelly, former Congressman and former Mayor Dennis Kucinich, former Cleveland City Councilman Zach Reed, and Senator Sandra Williams, the only woman in the field. And now my colleague, Commissioner LaToya Logan, will ask the first question.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the community for being here. I am excited to hear the responses from our candidates. As a long-serving member of the commission and a person who definitely stands with Aisha Bell Hardaway, I am interested in knowing what has been your involvement with the CPC in the past, and what have you accomplished or initiated towards police reform in Cleveland in the past 4 years?
Thank you, LaToya Logan. This question will be answered in the following order. First, Zach Reed. Second, Dennis Kucinich. Third, Justin Bibb. Fourth, Kevin Kelly. Sixth, Ross DeBello. Seven, Sandra Williams. And seven, really, Bashir Jones. I got confused because I had Mr. Simmons listed in my list. Please begin, Councilman Reed.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for the commission for the opportunity to speak to you and voters and the community as a whole. To answer your question, I can tell you that I've attended over 80% of the commission meetings across the city of Cleveland. I even presented in 2018 to the commission. As many of you know, I presented I had 5 different solution forums on violence, where I brought national leaders to Cleveland to talk about police reform and ways that we can reduce violence in the city of Cleveland. And in 2018, I was asked by the commission leaders to present those solutions to the commission. So I've been an intricate part of solutions and an ongoing conversation with the commission, which I'm happy to continue to do.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for your commitment to police reform. And I want to begin by saying that as mayor, I'm certainly going to re-invite Professor Hardaway to take place and take participation in these important issues. She has the experience and the passion, and I'm very concerned about the way she's been treated. I also want to say that I intend to have the CPC actively involved, and will seek your participation. You know, I'm not a newcomer to issues of police reform. In 1976, because of concern of police reform at a county level, I supported an African-American candidate for mayor who was totally committed to reform at a county level. A year later, as a Caucasian mayor, I
Mr. Bibb.
African-American safety directors and root out the racism in law enforcement. That's why a year later, when Cleveland was under a federal desegregation order, it was implemented peacefully because law enforcement personnel were sensitive to the concerns of parents. I set a peaceful tone. The court order was implemented peacefully, and I intend to set a peaceful tone as the next mayor of Cleveland.
Mr. Bibb.
Professor Katz, it's great to be back with my alma mater, Case Western Reserve University Law School. After the murder of Tamir Rice in 2014, I and other fellow leaders in this community co-founded Hack Cleveland, which was the birthplace of Unveil, an app that is working with residents all across the city to help them navigate the criminal justice system right now. And as a member of the board of RTA, I fought and made sure that every transit police officer in RTA has a body cam. And I continue to push the administration in RTA to have a citizen civilian review oversight board of the transit police department. I believe that now is the time for us to look hard at new ideas and new solutions to eradicate the structural racism in our police department. And that commitment must be sustained over time with the next mayor.
Thank you. Council President Kelly. You're muted, sir.
Very sorry. Start my time. Mr. Katz, I want to thank you for pulling this together. And as council president, I've been involved with the CPC since its inception. It began with reviewing members of the selection panel with the mayor that would eventually select the members of the CPC. I've also been involved in the selection of the review board, members of the review board, and work with my colleagues to pass bias-free policing ordinance. I attend Judge Adrian's discussions about the consent decree, frequent contact with the law department on our progress, and I read all of the submittals that the monitor suggests. And the work of the CPC has just been extremely valuable as we work to evolve the division of police.
Thank you. Mr. DeBello.
Thank you. Well, I had no involvement with the CPC. Working at the Justice Center and at the Court of Common Pleas and adjacent to the Muni Court informed me long ago we need police reform. It was clear to me that we have racial biases and tragedies within the system, costly lawsuits. On my docket, we had the case of the estate of a now deceased bipolar Asian American man versus a local suburban municipality, where that police department responded to a mental health call and the plaintiff ended up shot and killed. It was a clear example of the changes we need. Further, we criminalize certain drugs, homelessness, and mental health, but see the sex and violent crimes units go understaffed. Not once in my 7 years did I hear officers or prosecutors say that more police would have stopped the crime. From my ward club experience, it's clear Clevelanders know about the reforms and the accountability they want, which is why I signed the Citizens for Safer CLE petition, would fund it appropriately if passed, and have proposed numerous other democratic reforms.
Thank you.
Mr. Katz, should I go?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. And I also want to let you all know that we are still in session here. We took a quick break, so I may have to leave early to get back to session. So to answer your question, my interaction with the commission has been watching the meetings, also reading the reports that have been submitted for the public to review. I've also here in the legislature passed a civilian interaction bill that requires law enforcement officers as well as citizens to have training. Law enforcement would have training every year to understand how to interact with law enforcement on civilians, as well as people in high school being trained before they leave high school on how to interact with law enforcement officers. That was a piece of legislation passed in the state of Texas after Sandra Bland passed away. The goal is to make sure that all people get home safely, not only police officers, but the average everyday citizen. Secondly, I caused the creation of the Ohio Community and Police Collaborative. And in that position, we were able to set over 30 standards that law enforcement agencies have to pass or should pass in order to make sure that the police are working in conjunction in a safe way with the public. I can give you more information on that, but the Ohio Collaborative has been in place since I would say about 5 years now, and we're doing great work working with law enforcement officers, professors like Professor Hardaway and others all across the state of Ohio. And we have also had people come in from the national level to look at how we're policing in the state of Ohio. It has made a huge difference for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and Professor Hardaway, we stand with her. She's doing a phenomenal work, and we support the petition that's going around to make sure that she has the support that she deserves. You know, CPC is a very, very important organization, and whether the consent decree is here or not, it needs to remain. I've been a leading voice in City Hall in regards to equity, leading marches all throughout the city, hearing the voices of the people. And the voices of the people say something very special, which is we have to start being proactive and not reactive. Just thinking that adding police will change our situation is not the goal. The true goal is making sure that we add police officers that are good, that are culturally competent, and who understand the community that they are serving. CPC is absolutely necessary. And whether the consent decree is here or not, it must remain established. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. The second question will be asked by Commissioner Gordon Friedman.
Good evening, and thank you all for attending. I also would like to state that I stand by Professor Aisha Hardaway and urge that she be returned to her position as the co-chair of the monitoring team. My question is, would you present, or do you presently, and would you as mayor support the charter amendment that proposes to make the Cleveland Police Commission and the Civilian Review Board a permanent bodies to oversee the Cleveland Police Department once the consent decree expires?
Thank you, Gordon. The order in which you candidates will answer that question will be Congressman Kucinich, then Councilman Jones, then Senator Williams, Mr. Bibb, Mr. DeBello, Councilman Reed, Council President Kelly. So, Congressman Kucinich, you're on. And you're muted.
Okay, we good?
Yes, go.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've read the amendment very carefully, and I would agree that crime is the number one concern of the people of Cleveland, and we know that there needs to be effective oversight of the police department. But I don't, unfortunately, I just can't support. It's going to make Cleveland safer, I'm sure, and drafted by people of like mind. But that doesn't always make for good policy. Tomorrow, because you deserve a detailed response of more than a minute, I'm going to issue on Kucinich.com a full analysis of the charter amendment. And as mayor, I certainly look forward to working with each and every one of you to make sure that your voices are heard on matters of police reform, to consult with you, and to make sure that police reform is kept uppermost in the minds of people with respect to public safety. But in my humble estimation, this charter amendment doesn't accomplish what I think is in the interest of the people of Cleveland.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Without a doubt, this must be something that we keep despite the consent decree leaving. You know, we have to be proactive in our city. Crime is a symptom of a bigger problem. And that's what we have to understand. And when you're connected to the community, you recognize that saying we need more police or more of this or more of that are buzzwords for tactics that has been used through structural racism to harm certain communities and uplift others. As one Cleveland, we have to recognize that we must hear the voices of the people. And that's what CPC is. It is a voice of the people. And in order for us to bring about a change in our city, we must have good officers, we must have good residents, right? We must have good politicians who are not afraid to speak truth to power, who are not afraid to say that structural racism is a real thing and it is truly impacting our community. This must be a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-socioeconomic status fight for every last one of us to make Cleveland a better place. CPC is absolutely necessary. It is the voice of the people.
Thank you, sir. Senator Williams.
Yes, I believe transparency is key. And given the fact that we all want to make sure that our community is as safe as it can be, I do support both the Civilian Review Board and the CPC. So yes, I do. I also think that we should look at the amendment and see what things we should add or take away, making sure that we are not having any conflicts of interest in what we are trying to accomplish here. So yes, I do believe both are very important and are key.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb.
I want to be clear about this. The Cleveland ballot initiative for a safer Cleveland is going to truly create an independent civilian review oversight board in our police department. I wholeheartedly endorse the ballot initiative. I was the first candidate in this race for mayor to endorse the ballot initiative because we spent nearly $30 million over the last decade settling police misconduct claims. And the police cannot continue to police themselves. And when the consent decree expires, we need to embed these reforms over time. And I'm afraid without this ballot initiative, it will not get done. I'm a son of a police officer. I get both sides of this. This is not an anti-police message. It's about making sure our residents feel safe and secure and their rights are respected in this city. That's what's on the ballot with this initiative, and I wholeheartedly support it on day one as the next mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. DeBello.
Yes, I do, and I would continue to support the charter amendment to make the police commission and the review board permanent oversight bodies. Every institution, including the presidency or mayor's office, needs checks and balances to ensure it acts as appropriate as possible at all times. I think internal affairs is insufficient and police cannot be expected to sharply police themselves. These outside bodies help to get us to accountability. Further, I would fund these bodies at an appropriate level and am for them having the teeth they need, including focused and experienced members and monitors such as Professor Hardaway. This would ideally create a scenario whereby uses of excessive force would naturally crater and people might then argue nothing's wrong and we don't need the groups. It's a win-win 99% of the time, and we need to ensure independent oversight of potential misconduct while hopefully saving lives and the money associated with this American problem.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
First of all, yes, I do agree that the CPC need to stay intact with or without the consent decree. I do support Professor Hardaway. As a matter of fact, I sent a letter to an editorial newspaper today expressing my support of Ms. Hardaway. But I'm stunned that suddenly, I know this is not a debate, but suddenly everybody on here agrees that the CPC is important. But the CPP has been in place for a long time. And in the first question, it was like, have you been involved? And not one person but myself said, I've attended meetings. It's been in place for an awful long time. If it's so important, why haven't the candidates gone to these meetings? They're open to the public, they're free to the public, and they have the ability to go. And I went even when I was not an elected official. So it's somewhat stunning that all of a sudden everybody agrees that we need to wrap our arms around the CPC. But over the years, I'm the only candidate that has gone to meetings and have been involved on the ground and given solutions to the CPC. So yes, I agree the CPC needs to stay in place.
Thank you, sir. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. Just let me state again how important the work of the CPC and the Civilian Review Board has been, but the amendment goes far beyond whether it should be permanent or not. And I do have significant concerns with how the proposed charter amendment is written and some of the provisions contained within it. That being said, I'm going to continue to support the CPC and the community all the community oversight that's in place. But I do have significant concerns with the way that this charter amendment is written and the provisions within.
Thank you. Question 3 will be asked by Commissioner Charmin Leon.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here this evening. I also support Professor Aisha Hardaway, and on behalf of the Black Shield, support her reinstatement. Candidates, could you please share with us what you believe are 3 ways systemic racism manifests in the CDP, Cleveland Division of Police, if at all?
This question will be asked, excuse me, will be answered in the following order. Mr. Jones, Mr. DeBello, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kucinich, Mr. Bibb, Mr. Reed, and Ms. Williams. Councilman Jones, you're first up.
A 3 is not even sufficient. It's so many more. But when you look at testing, there's a major issue in testing. There's a major issue when it comes to the culture of the police department. There's a major issue when we talk about the officers who are disciplined and the officers who are allowed to get away with certain things. The upward mobility, the fact that we have a police department that doesn't even a little bit resemble the demographic of this city. And we can go on and on and on. But in order for us to talk about how to make our community better and safer, we have to do a better job of community policing. We have to do a better job of when we send officers out into situations that they are prepared to deal with it. That's why as mayor, we want to create a mobile crisis unit. Officers shouldn't be the only ones that come out to scenes. We should have therapists. We should also have trauma experts. Daddy don't always need to go to jail. Sometimes daddy just need to take a walk.
Thank you, sir. Mr. DeBello.
Yeah, to a certain extent in America, we've enacted policies which criminalize Black life for the police departments to then enforce those policies. It's all dynamic and it all bleeds together. There were manipulations created in the mortgage lending and real estate markets, leading to redlining, segregated communities, and concentrated poverty, school vouchers and defunding of the public schools, 3 strikes and you're out, and the war on drugs, but more so some drugs rather than others. To specifically answer the question, I think it's manifested in the statistics on past marijuana arrests, traffic stops, and estimations of Clevelanders' ages. In similarly sized cities, it's statistically racially disparate searches and seizures and handcuffing when not arrested. This hints at the cognitive bias that leads to genuine fear. Yet another way would be the testing and hiring deficiencies and wondering why in a city with so many Black women, we don't have more Black female police officers.
Thank you. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. Systemic racism, it exists in our society, and in any police department, in the presence of systemic racism is more significant because police officers have guns and authority. In Cleveland, we have the consent decree for a reason, and those reasons represent the extreme examples of systemic racism manifesting itself. In more subtle ways, we know that there's evidence of bias in things like the recruiting, hiring. We still do not have a division of police that reflects the makeup of the city of Cleveland. And we have to always continue to do that. And we're not asking the right questions because we've been working at this for a long time. But when you look at the hiring practice, what the division looks like currently, and then you get to the traffic stops, drug arrests, systemic racism is a part of the Cleveland Division of Police, and we really need to continue to work to root it out.
you. Congressman Kucinich. You're muted, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think all of us recognize that systemic racism is endemic in our society. You know, why isolate it to the CPD, except as, you know, as it's been said, people have guns, and when they have guns, you've got to be concerned about any expression of racism. Now, as mayor, I will provide the guidance to those who serve our city, and to help them understand that that we are one city, we are one people with one standard of law enforcement, which must be diverse, it must be colorblind, it has to be compassionate, it has to be strong, it must respect civil liberties. And I intend to meet with policewomen and policemen frequently to lead, to impress upon them the expectation that they'll follow the higher standards, and to set an example that they can follow and model and spread a new ethic of civil rights awareness through the ranks. This is about leadership, and it's about experience and life experience in dealing with people. We've all seen the racism, and we know we cannot tolerate it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bibb.
Well, as a Black man in the city who's been pulled over by the police way too many times, I know very well that racism exists in our police department and in all facets of our city right now. And when you think about the tragic murder of our brother, Tamir Rice, he could be alive today if we had an independent civilian review oversight board in the city of Cleveland that wouldn't have allowed us to hire an officer that didn't deserve to be in our police department in the first place. Secondly, we all know that people of color are more likely to get pulled over for a traffic stop and are more likely to be put in the criminal justice system for non-violent traffic offenses. It's very clear that we need to do everything we can as a city to eradicate the structural racism that exists in our police department. And the next mayor must have the moral authority to restore that trust and to hold our department accountable to meet that equity test, because our residents deserve it day in and day out.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Reed.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Officer Lahone and all the members of the Black Shields for their service to our city and going out there every day, putting their lives on the line for the citizens of the city of Cleveland. I think it manifests itself in racism when you look at the fact that police officers patrol high crime areas like it's a war zone. Second of all, the lack of concern of mental health issues in the African-American community. And then thirdly, the disproportionate arrest of people of color, especially African-American men. So as mayor of the city of Cleveland, I'm gonna do all that I possibly can to rid racism out of our safety forces, out of our system as a whole, and ensure that inclusion is at the top of the ladder food chain for me as mayor of the city of Cleveland.
Thank you, sir. Senator Williams.
Thank you very much. Well, as a person who worked in the field of criminal justice for 10.5 years, I've saw racism firsthand. I've witnessed it by being an employee of the situation, and I've saw some of my colleagues treat people the way that they should not have. And let me say for the record, when that did happen, I did intervene in that process. So I think racism rears its head when it comes to this type of stops that we have in our community. I can tell you one of the first things that happened when I was running for state representative a long time ago, a constituent came, knocked on my door and said, "Sandra, I need you to come outside." I came outside and there were about 10, 15 young Black men at Williams Park on Williams Street with shotguns to their head by police officers. I'll get to the short end of the story, but the bottom line is I asked the police officers what was happening and why they had those shotguns at their head. They said, "Get back, B, or you'll be down on the ground with them." Then I regrouped, I came back and I said, "I'm State Representative Sandra Williams." The guns came up The officers had a little bit more respect, and then they started telling me what happened. What happened was they were sitting in the park and it was after 8 o'clock. That was their crime. That should not happen. That is what's happening on these streets. And so to continue to answer your question, I think recruitment and hiring is key. We have to make sure that we are hiring the best and the brightest and those people who are not afraid to actually patrol our streets in the community. The investigation and discipline that's happening in our community, and reading some of the reports from the monitoring team and others, you'll see that the types of discipline that are being handed out are different from one type of officer to another. The bias-based policing that we have, and that culture of bias-based policing that is ingrained in our police department needs to stop. And that's going to take us basically throwing out the baby with the bathwater and starting over. Those are the types of things that I think we need to address systemic racism. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We come now to question 4, which will be asked by my co-chair, Commissioner Victoria Marion.
Good evening, panel. I would like to first thank you for feeling that this was important enough for you to be a part of it. My question is, if you become mayor, how will you determine whether to replace the police chief? And if so, how would you go about selecting a new chief?
Thank you. This question will be answered in the following order. Senator Williams, Congressman Kucinich, Mr. DeBello, Councilman Jones, Councilman Reed, Mr. Bibb, and Council President Kelly. So Senator Williams, would you please start us off?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to see who actually wants to stay on as my one of my chiefs in my administration. That's the first thing, because everybody might not want to stay. The culture will definitely change with me as mayor. But one of the things I would do is, number one, look at the evaluations and the past reports, records of people who have been in these positions before, and just see what they have done, what they have not done, and what they should be doing better, working with people who are experts in the field. Secondly, I would talk to those officers who are on the ground every day. I think we overlook those people who do this for a living. Those people know what's good, what's bad, what's happened in the community that should not have happened, and what things that could have been done better. Then I would also, if necessary, cast a wide net and try to figure out who within any part of this country is ready to stand with me and turn this police force around. So I'm not confining myself to the city of Cleveland. I want the best and the brightest leadership team within my department. And let me just also say that we definitely need to have more minorities and more women in these positions. That will be key for me.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich, your answer, please.
I would agree with what Senator Williams just said. We have to be sensitive to those concerns. And I'm worried that it might be more difficult to recruit a police chief if the charter amendment, which is the subject of this discussion, passes, because a chief would not have the authority over the department. But I will say this, as mayor, I am going to be happy to meet with members of the commission before I make the appointment, to talk to people in the department, to talk to people in the community, to hear your concerns. I will request that top-ranking members of the Cleveland Police Department are able to apply for chief, including, by the way, the present chief. Clevelanders, I think, want their chief to be an effective crime fighter with the wisdom to temper law enforcement with a strong awareness of civil liberties and an impartial exercise of police authority. So we want a police chief who will truly be sensitive to the concerns that people have of community policing, and also be ready to help lift the burden this city has of so many neighborhoods being overrun by crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeBello, you're next.
Yes, I would honestly and earnestly try to talk to all parties involved and read as many reports as possible and delegate where appropriate in the research part of the task. I've never met the chief, so I'd talk with him and see if he even wants to continue into a new administration. But I'd talk to officers young and old, black and white, male and female, retired and transferred, the Latino and Black Shield unions, the CPPA, Black Lives Matter, the CPC, and other leaders in Cleveland. Those discussions will go hand in hand with seeking out, if not the chief, who's the best person for the job within our sphere, or do we need to go outside our sphere to another city? We think outside the box, but most likely use civil service rank as opposed to an appointment and hire a captain or another chief. As this campaign should already prove, I'm an extremely diligent person, and if victorious on November 2nd, I'll have more than enough time to put the work in to be ready by January.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much. My transition team will assist me in making that decision. And that transition team must and will be filled with community organizations like this. The community will have a say-so on what the next chief of police will be. Let me be clear. I don't want the chief of police or any officer to be colorblind. I want them to see my blackness and see my humanity. This is very, very important. Let me say it's not sufficient to just be black. It's not sufficient what gender you are. What is sufficient and what is important is, do you have the community consciousness? Are you conscious about what it takes to take our community to the next level? And this is very, very, very important. We have to get out of this mindset of the box. We have to think outside of it. And if we don't, we'll remain inside. So my transition team will assist me in making that decision. And without a doubt, CPC and other organizations who have been on the ground will be a part of that.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
Well, I think the question is, what would you do to get rid of a police chief? And I mean, bottom line, it doesn't matter if it's a police chief, doesn't matter if it's the director of public works, doesn't matter if it's the director of health. If they ain't doing their damn job, they're gonna get fired. I mean, it's simple as that. They got a job to do. They need to be held accountable. And if they're not doing their job, they're not being held accountable, I gotta let them go. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, look at the statistics right now. I am the only one on this panel thus far that has sent a letter that said the police chief Williams should be relieved of his duties. Why? You said, Mr. Katz, that we had 177 homicides last year. Let me correct you. It was 180. This year, we already got 80 homicides. So we are well on our way to 100 homicides for the 10th consecutive year. It all starts from the top. And Calvin and the chief has been there throughout this tenure to watch over mostly black men in this city being killed. And therefore, he needs to be relieved of his duty. We need to bring in a new police chief. We need to start over, and we need to bring in qualified individuals to run the police force in a constitutional fashion, in a way that respects the people in the community, and stop the violence in the city of Cleveland.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bibb.
I'm not a politician. I spent the last 15 years of my career as an executive, managing large teams, managing large budgets. And as an executive, you have to make smart, thoughtful, but decisive action. Chief Williams has violated the public trust, and we need real, strong accountability, and he has to go. And as the next mayor, I'm going to look locally and also far and wide to find the right leader to fix morale, to hold our officers accountable, and to make sure we're doing the hard work of truly solving the root causes of violent crime that continue to plague our city day in and day out. We can't afford more equivocation. We can't afford more of the same. $30 million over the last decade settling police misconduct claims, and yet no decisive real action on creating new cultural change inside our police department. This is a very simple answer. He has to go. It's time to hit the reset button and do the hard work of rethinking what policing should look like right here in Cleveland, Ohio.
Thank you, sir. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. I want to begin by just acknowledging that it's very difficult to really answer this decision in 1 minute for this reason. This is probably the single most significant personnel decision that I will make as mayor. This has so much involved with it. I will certainly begin with the current police. I don't know if Chief Williams intends to stay or not, but we need to change the culture of the division of police. Somebody that is going to restore morale. I have not seen morale as low as it is right now. We need somebody that's going to reflect the values that I will bring to the mayor's office. Somebody that will continue to view the division of police as having a guardian role and not a warrior role. Somebody that understands the significance of what the division of police means to this community. This is the most important personnel decision that the next mayor of the city of Cleveland will make. Thank you.
The next question will be asked by Commissioner Dr. Megan Testa.
As mayor, what procedures would you wish to be put in place to ensure that people with violent tendencies or sociopathic traits do not become Cleveland police officers? And would you support allocating more funds to the existing officer wellness programming that supports our officers?
Thank you, Dr. Testa. This question will be answered in the following order. Justin Bibb, Sandra Williams, Bashir Jones, Dennis Kucinich, Kevin Kelly, Ross DeBello, and Zach Reed. Mr. Bibb.
Absolutely. I saw this in my own life as a son of a police officer. My dad struggled with PTSD. He struggled with trauma. He struggled with substance abuse. And I know that there were some moments he didn't get the wellness and the help he needed as a first responder. And I believe we have to do everything we can to support our officers to truly help them with the trauma and mental health issues they have. I also believe it's important that we do a better job of supporting more rigorous screening and checking to ensure we're hiring the right type of officers that have the right cultural competency and mental health awareness to do their jobs as police officers in our department. And then also want to ensure that our police department supports the officer wellness program that was just established by the Ohio Collaborative Community Policing Advisory Board. Those are the types of programs we need to invest in to ensure officers can show up to do their job with the resources they need to protect and serve our citizens.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Yes. Number one, yes, I would support more funds for the wellness program. That's number one. Number two, as a person who, again, worked in the field of criminal justice, I've seen people on the streets with me who should not have ever had that job. So the first thing I think we should be looking at is more testing, psychological testing, testing to make sure people have the right frame of mind to be on the streets with myself and other people, personality evaluations. I would also consider checking with past employers to make sure that what they put on their resume is actually true. We've heard the case here in the city of Cleveland where that has happened before. The other thing is checking with neighbors and friends. People who live by you know and understand what you are like on a regular basis. So going out, checking with neighbors like they do with the State Highway Patrol, checking with your family members to make sure that you are fit for this job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much. While in council, I supported mindfulness programs for our officers. It is really important that we recognize that our officers are human beings as well, and they are experiencing a trauma. And as mayor, we have to make sure that the officers that are doing great are being highlighted. We have to make sure that we don't throw CPD all the way away, that there's a lot of great officers that are doing a lot of great work, and we have to support that. I think that we have to become, not a thing for sure, we must become a part of the national database that allows us to know where officers are coming from. The murder, we have to make sure that we say Tamir Rice didn't just die, he was murdered. And that officer that did it had some serious issues prior to coming to Cleveland. So in becoming a part of the national database, at that point, we will understand what our officers are bringing to the table. And at the same time, we have to stop handcuffing our officers in the city. We have to allow them to do their jobs and do it in the right way. I think this is very, very important that we recognize that our officers and the community that they serve are dealing with a serious trauma. And as mayor, we have to be able to recognize that. Very important.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich.
Councilman Jones makes some compelling arguments about innovation, mindfulness, and about making sure that we don't handcuff the police. All of us want a police department whose members are physically, mentally, and emotionally up to the difficult challenges of crime prevention. You know, I have a great concern that the charter amendment that is being promoted is actually going to make police work much more difficult, much more stressful, and police are going to even need more help than they need now. Now, I want to say that there are already in place requirements for screening for physical and mental health. Applicants have to withstand review by over a dozen people. And you know, I'm all for, in line with what Senator Williams said, ever more extensive checking. I also do want to say that support for wellness programs, fundamental. Crime prevention takes a toll on the men and women who protect us. And we always have to remember, these are human beings. And in some cases, we're asking them to do a job that seems, you know, almost impossible. So we as an ex-mayor of Cleveland, understanding, you know, with my own life experience and government experience, I intend to balance these conflicting interests, but also make sure that those who wear that badge are well qualified. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. So we currently already have a rigorous background screening where we visit neighbors, there is psychological testing, but obviously it's not being administered properly because people are still getting through. And we really need to look at, is it a policy issue or is it a personnel issue in terms of those that are doing the screening, those that are interpreting the test, and those that are making the decisions? To me, that's where the problem lies. As far as officer wellness, I absolutely support this. I was speaking to an officer recently that informed me that they are expected to go on, the men and women in the zone cars are expected to go on 20 to 30 calls for service in a shift. And sometimes they're in one-person cars. Now, we expect them to be at their best on their 29th call, just as their first call, and doing all the paperwork in between. We can't expect those people that do this hard work. And I recall when I was a social worker, when you're dealing with people in crisis, it's mentally draining, it's exhausting. Attend to the needs of the men and women that are currently in Division of Police and make sure that we are giving them the tools to do their job correctly, including attending to their wellness. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeBello.
Thank you. Well, I think first we would want to have a new and independent HR person or people review our current employee records to root out any of those traits. As for new hires, we want to look at the current application and testing processes, see where we can innovate and make sure no stone is unturned in that vetting process. So nobody has scoured more records than us when we do new hires. I would support allocating more funds to the existing officer wellness employee assistance program because I'm a firm believer that nobody can optimally take care of others if they're not clear-headed and personally centered. Officers are civilians in a very high-stress job, and in any department, in order to give the public better service, you have to care about your employees' wellness, and that'll show a return on the investment. Employee assistance needs to create an air of confidence and security to be sought out. It can't be like a secret yet known probation, it needs to be truly anonymous and can't cost officers their sick time.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
Well, first of all, I support fully funding the wellness program for officers. They have a very difficult job, challenging job, stressful job. But when you want to become an FBI agent, they do an extensive background check on you. I'm not saying we need to go down that far, but clearly we're not doing the background checks that we should be doing, where Timothy Loman would not have been a police officer. And if Timothy Loman had not been a police officer, he would not have shot and killed Tamir Rice in the Cadell Rec Center park. And you know what? Then Tamir Rice will be here tomorrow to be able to celebrate for his mom, Samir Rice, to be able to celebrate his 19th birthday. Tomorrow would have been his 19th birthday if we would have done an extensive background check and not hired Timothy Loman to be a police officer. She would be embracing her son tomorrow at his 19th birthday. So yes, we need to get the background check more in a way that helps to hire good police officers on the force.
Thank you, sir. Question 6 will be asked by Commissioner Gail Maxwell. In the absence of Commissioner Maxwell, I will ask her question. How will the candidate make the CPD more competitive against other police departments requiring hiring practices? This is not a question about retaining personnel, but a question about how the candidate plans to attract applicants away from other departments. This question will be answered in the following order. Senator Williams, Mr. DeBello, Councilman Reed, Mr. Bibb, Council President Kelly, Congressman Kucinich, and Councilman Jones. Senator Williams.
All right, thank you very much for that question. All of us have options in this society, even when it comes to jobs. There are so many jobs available in our communities right now, and even across the state and other countries. So the question is, if I were going out to try to recruit somebody, number one, I would hope that current officers would be in line with me to talk to potential candidates. But the first question a person might ask is, how are you treated on your job? Are you respected? What is it like being a police officer? What is the morale like within your department? So the first thing we need to do is get that straight. We need to make sure that we have a place that people actually want to come to every day and work and feel respected by the people that are supervising them or who are their leaders. That's the first thing. And then getting into some of the other things that people care about. Number one, benefits. I'm losing my train of thought, but benefits, moving up the ladder. How do you move up the ladder? Is it fair? School opportunities, furthering your education within the department, those things that people look for that will not only help further their career, but will make their families' lives a lot better as well. So benefits, the treatment of the police officers, and where can we go? Am I stuck when I come in as a police officer, or is there time or a place for growth? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeBello.
I think in order to give more value than just an officer's salary and benefits, we're going to have to leverage the brand name and the place of Cleveland, have officers throw out first pitches at baseball games, and have friends of the city assist in throwing birthday and retirement parties at the local restaurants and establishments. But I think the main thing stems from what we're here to do today and beyond: train, educate, work with the community, and eliminate any excess uses of force and any backlash therefrom, like protests and such. Once we eliminate the angst and financial costs of these incidents, this will be a more friendly and meaningful place to police and a better option to come and retire. I think in Cleveland, we're in a better spot than like Minneapolis or Columbus, but in a tougher spot than the suburbs. Attrition is too high. The drop program isn't working here, and now officers are going to the suburbs. I also think the previous question about improving the employee assistance wellness program plays a role.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
I think first of all, we need to embrace the concept that Eric Gordon, who had the conversation with today, is embracing that we need to start very young. And the new South High that's being renovated into a school where officers are going to be trained there, and they're going to take their young people and actually implement them and integrate them into that training with police officers right there in South High. I think the other thing, let's not fool ourselves, giving them a higher salary. I mean, City of Cleveland starting pay is very low when you look at it from the other major cities in the state of Ohio. But I'm not opposed to looking at things like housing. I mean, why not give them an incentive towards housing? Why not give our police officers an incentive when it comes to education? I mean, these are things that we need to do. If we do those things, then we need to also say, if I give you incentives for housing, if I give you incentives for education, then you're going to have to sign a contract that says you're going to stay, you're going to live in the city of Cleveland, and you're going to stay in the city of Cleveland for a period of time. You're not going to get our training, you're not going to get our funding, and then you're going to move to go to Euclid or Willoughby or wherever it may be. We're going to train you, we're going to help you with housing, we're going to give you good education, and then we're going to allow you to be a police officer in the city of Cleveland. But you're gonna sign a contract that says that you're gonna stay here in the city of Cleveland for a period of time.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb.
This is why culture change is so important at the top. And I intend to work with my next police chief to make sure we're setting the right culture of recruiting and attracting officers who want to do the hard work of rethinking what policing should look like in our city. Secondly, we have to start earlier to encourage residents that live in the city of Cleveland in high school, like a cadet academy, to make them a part of our police force. My dad, who was an officer, he was from the neighborhood and he understood the lived experiences of the residents he was serving. We also have to do the hard work of restoring morale in our police department. I talked to a number of different officers and morale couldn't be lower. And the reason why is that we haven't had a meritocracy inside of our police department. We got to make sure we are hiring folks who want to show up, do the job, and respect hard work and evaluate that talent based on merit, not based on who you're friends with, and ensure that the culture reflects the lived experiences of our residents and the officers that are a part of our police department.
Thank you. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. We need to start by acknowledging that we have a problem. It wasn't that long ago where the line to take the test to be a member of the Division of Police used to come out of Public Hall, and it used to wrap around. It was a very coveted position. It was a position that people sought after. It breaks my heart when I talk to members of the Division of Police that say that they wouldn't recommend it to their son or their daughter now. That is something that should shock all of us to really come to action on this. And if we look at what is happening, we've all touched on morale. Morale has not been lower. I talked about the fact that officers are expected to do 20 to 30 calls for service per shift. If that's the work environment, that's not the environment that we're going to be able to attract the best and the brightest to. We need to pay more. We need to train more. We need to make sure that being a member of the Division of Police is a career that people are proud of, a career people love, and a career that they would recommend to their family and their friends to join the Division of Police, because it is a calling to serve people.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich.
Thank you very much. I think I'm on the same page with Councilman Zach Reed with respect to incentives. But I have to say to all my colleagues here, and I'll say it again, I've read the charter amendment, And I think it's going to discourage people from being Cleveland police officers or from joining the Cleveland Police Department. Endless investigations, legal expenses, stress and strain. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have a complete and comprehensive analysis of that charter amendment, which I don't know that anybody else has presented yet, but I'm going to share it with the community. I think we should and can attract police with better pay. I intend to do that as mayor, with college tuition benefits if they serve Cleveland for 5 years. You're right, Councilman Reed, there should be a contract with that regard. We want our police to be well educated, to be an effective crime fighting force with the knowledge and respect for civil liberties. And in my announcement, I spoke exactly about that. I want to see at least 400 new policemen brought in, plus 100 people who would have a background in mental health and social work, because not every response to every call is going to require someone showing up with a gun, and often it shouldn't. So, I think we can attract people, but be careful we don't change the structure of our government, make it more difficult than ever. Thank you.
Councilman Jones.
In an attempt to hold our officers accountable, we can't throw away the amount of officers that are doing a great job. Pay, of course, we can strive to pay officers a better wage, but people just want to be treated like human beings. And in our attempt to reform, as we should, we also have to do a better job of acknowledging that people are doing a great work. They're doing a great job. Our officers are doing some great work, putting their lives on the line every single day. And what I think is very important is that we look at recruiting. We have to start recruiting within our own community. And that's something that very few people have the ability to do, like me, to reach the community right here, to begin to change the perception of how people view the police. Start with them as children. I've been working with the recruitment office, working to try not only recruit more police officers, but all of our safety forces. And I think this is extremely, extremely important for us to understand. Can we reach the everyday Clevelander? And that's something that I've shown. People can say what they're going to do, but the question is, what have they done? And very few people have shown the ability to reach the everyday Clevelander. You got to start while they're young to change their perception of police.
You're muted, Lou. I'm sorry. Thank you. Question 7 will be asked by community activist Dave Lima.
Thank you. Here we go. Thank you for your participation in tonight's forum. Some are advocating that more police are needed to deter crime. Do you believe adding more police to the Cleveland Division of Police and bringing in more federal officers to Cleveland to fight crime are effective crime reduction approach? And if not, what are your views concerning the roots of crime that need to be addressed?
Thank you. This question will be answered in the following order: Kevin Kelly, Sandra Williams, Bashir Jones, Dennis Kucinich, Zach Reed, Justin Bibb, Ross DeBello. Council President Kelly, you're.
Thank you. So the starting point is that we need to staff at the level that council funded the Division of Police at. The current budget, we're almost 100 uniformed personnel down from what was budgeted. There are still openings in our specialty units, domestic violence, sex crimes, homicide detectives. We're not going to get ahead at least until we get there. I do believe that in addition to that, it is likely necessary to add additional police officers. Do I think that this is the only strategy? No, but I think it's an important part of the equation. I think that we really need to have that relationship with our social service agencies, and we have to realize that we can't police our way out of our problems, and every call for service does not require police or police only. So I think that the question of whether adding police is a step forward. I do think there's a role for that. I think we need to start by getting to the level council budgeted for. And in terms of the division, the working with the federal authorities, I don't know about bringing federal agents in. That's going to be out of my authority. But we have had tremendous progress partnering with the Marshal's Office, with the FBI, with the Violent Fugitive Task Force, and we've had a lot of success there. But again, we have to deal with the roots of crime if we're ever going to solve this. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
As Council President Kelly said, every 911 call isn't necessarily a 911 call. It might be a call that could be handled by a different type of agency. So I think having wraparound services, those individuals, social workers, and others who deal with mental health, alcohol and drug addiction counseling, and others should be on somewhere with the team in a bus or however they want to travel to the call. Two, I want to make sure that we expand that. I know we have something similar to that in Cleveland right now, I believe from the hours of about 3 to 8 p.m., but those types of crimes, those type of calls don't just happen from 3 to 8 p.m. So we need to expand those hours to make sure that those individuals who have expertise to handle certain type of incidents are available to law enforcement officers. As far as hiring more individual police officers, yes, I think we should, and we should use them strategically. We should make sure that we have the best and the brightest teams available. We should have specialized teams available that can go out and solve some of the most horrific crimes that we have available in our community. And I do believe partnering with the state, like we do sometimes now with State Highway Patrol and others, federal agencies, if they are willing to come in, and others, is one way for us to address this crime. You started out with the numbers about the number of violent crimes, the number of murders. We hear the gunshots every night when we're out there. We need to make sure we have a targeted approach to reduce violent crime. And I am willing to work with anybody, any agency who is willing to help me reduce crime and help make the people in the city of Cleveland safer. I will end with the fact that when we talk about crime, we do need to look at the root cause of crime, and you start looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you start talking about the basic things that people don't have: housing, education, healthcare, food, insecurity. When people don't have those basic things, they are going to go out and do things that they probably wouldn't otherwise do. So we need to address the systemic—
Senator, your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much. You know, just adding officers is not sufficient. I know some of my other candidates believe that adding more officers will save the day, and that's not it. But when you're removed from the community, you say things like this. And the reality is that the community understands that in certain neighborhoods, more police does not mean more of a peaceful situation. See, I plan to be the ambassador of this city. You know, I hear people calling young people terrorists and saying that we're acting like crabs in a bucket. But crabs' natural state is not to be in buckets. Who put the crabs in the bucket in the first place? We have to be proactive in understanding that this is a systematic issue. It's a systematic issue. The real crime is not when the bullets come out of the guns. The real crime is the food deserts, the high infant mortality, the fact that we have so much lead even in the soil of our ground, the bad air quality, right? These are all situations that we must acknowledge. We must deal with this in a holistic way. And as not only the mayor, I plan to be the ambassador of the city, that people have to feel that tomorrow will be better than today. They have to feel hopeful that their leader understands their pain. And with these type of statements, it's crystal clear that you're not where you say you're from.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich.
Thank you, Councilman Jones, for eloquently speaking to the plight of people who are beset by crime every day. When I announced for mayor, I said that I felt that we need at least 400 new police. They have to be very well trained, and 100 safety assistants who would be have expertise in mental health and social work to answer non-violent calls. But there is no question that we have to go deeper to examine the root of crimes and violence in our community. Now, this is why I've called for the creation of a civic peace department, not only to study, but to act upon new ways of resolving conflict and addressing those antecedents of violence. We have to pay careful attention to the rising poverty in our community, to the hopelessness that attends that, to the lack of opportunities, to the imperative of addressing social and economic justice issues. And I will say that as mayor, I will be well prepared with life experience and experience at every level of government to meet this complex challenge. I would not be and will not be able to do it alone. And should I be elected, I will invite my colleagues who are participating, who are so well-spoken and knowledgeable, to join together, where we all work together to lift up our city. Thank you.
Councilman Reed.
Thank you. Let me first of all say to my good friend, Bashir Jones, I'm not removed from my community. I live in one of the highest crime communities in the entire city. I buy my gas on Kinsman. I live on Kinsman. I go to church in the neighborhood. So I'm not removed in any way, but I don't live in a fool's paradise either. And right now with police retiring at an alarming rate, we got to fill that gap and we got to fill that void. In no way are police officers going to be able to solve this problem of violence in our community by themselves. And I don't expect them to, and I know they can't expect themselves to do either. But we have to look at the root cause of this violence in our communities. And I've said this for the last 10 years. You got to look at the fact of lack of good paying jobs in our communities with benefits. You got to look at the lack of good education in our community. You got to look at the lack of opportunities for our young people. Every young person in the city of Cleveland should have a summer job right now. And you've got to look at the lack of opportunities for returning citizens. We all know when returning citizens do not get the opportunity to engage back into society, they do things to go back in. If we do those things, you will see this city become safer under a Zach Reed administration, because I will do those things.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb.
I want to be clear about something really important. This is not a fancy research topic for me. This is personal. My cousin was murdered over 6 years ago by his partner who choked him to death. And it took EMS over 45 minutes to show up. Last year, I had to bury a family friend who was the 131st homicide in this city. But I also believe that a police solution alone is not going to solve the problem at all. Let's first start off by looking at our staffing allocations. Roughly 51% of our officers right now are walking the beat, and 49% are in desk jobs. That staffing allocation is not sufficient to handle the quality of life calls our residents need answered in a timely fashion. Secondly, we got to get real about doing the hard work of rethinking what policing should look like. As mayor, I want to add a fourth option in 911 around mental health, so we have the right response for the right call. And then thirdly, I also want to ensure that we have social workers and mental health professionals joining our first responders for non-violent dispatch calls. And as a city, we need to do everything we can as well to ensure our young people have access to opportunity all throughout the summer and after school during the school year. I would be dead right now, but if I didn't have vacation Bible school, but I didn't have midnight basketball, and if I didn't have high quality after school programs as a kid growing up on 121st and Dove. We got to get back to the basics in terms of investing in community programs and community policing as well to ensure every community is safe and secure in this city.
Thank you. Mr. DeBello.
Yeah, I do not believe that adding more officers at the local or federal level is an effective crime reduction approach. This gets back to my time and experience at the Justice Center and in the courts. As to the roots of crime, I don't think it's any coincidence that recently our local media has reported that we just surpassed Detroit as #1 in the entire nation in poverty, and previously we moved to #1 in child poverty. Now, these last few months and weekends, we're hearing of more carjackings and shootings. Crime is a socioeconomic problem, and it is the wealth dividing policies of our current local and suburban establishment which caused this poverty and crime. The super low minimum wage, tax handouts, and abatements to the campaign donor class has left too many of our parents and kids scrounging and not having the time or means to best educate and further their situations. It's not more police, it's a focused deterrence, but it's truly a better economy and equity that will help parents, kids, and police to less strife.
Thank you. We come now to question 8. I call on Commissioner Harriet Hadley. You're muted. Harriet, you're still muted.
My question is, can you hear me now? My question is, how will you rebuild the trust between the CPD and its residents?
Excuse me, I was muted. Mr. DeBello, Senator Williams, Mr. Bibb, Councilman Jones, Councilman Reed, Congressman Kucinich, Council President Kelly. Mr. DeBello, we start with you.
Thanks. To me, this is a long-term question, yet it needs a day-by-day approach and some luck. I think community events only go so far. Twice pre-pandemic, I was at Ward 5 Democratic meetings and officers came, gave updates, asked for concerns. But I think the only real answer is no further incidents of excessive force. But if we have such an incident, immediate reconciliation and discipline. This means officers not necessarily standing up for other officers and certainly not victim blaming. Very many of us love, want, and need our police because crime traumatizes us. But we should have officers supported by department leadership, walking around, being friendly, checking in like your mail carrier, high-fiving at Cavs games. And I think it's about full community education, gaining an understanding of proportionality and our own biases. Things like ACAB are wrong and counterproductive. Local media showing too many mugshots where someone isn't currently a wanted suspect is wrong and counterproductive.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Yes. Early on, I mentioned the fact that I asked Governor Kasich to create the Ohio Collaborative, which we did, and we set several standards to address the community and police relations. We traveled the entire state of Ohio listening to residents about the things they would like to see in order to feel more comfortable with the police in our community. So I think looking at some of those standards and putting those things in place is number one. Community policing. When I was a child, when I used to walk up and down the streets of Buckeye, I used to see police officers all the time walking up and down the street, talking to us, buying us candy on the street, and just enjoying being around us. I think we need to get back to real community policing as well. And then secondly, I would say, prove it, show me. If you want somebody to trust you, you have to prove to them that you can be trusted. So when we stop seeing people get beat, when we stop seeing people being arrested and stopped needlessly, when you see people who are treating you with the respect that you deserve as a citizen, then people might start trusting you. And I think it goes both ways, but that's what I see. When I see somebody, if I had a boyfriend and he wasn't beating me anymore, I believe he wasn't gonna beat me anymore. If he told me it wasn't gonna beat me and next thing you know, he beat me the next week, then there's a problem. So I'm not gonna trust you until you do what you say and treat me with the respect that I deserve.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb.
Well, to echo Senator Sandra Williams, well done is better than well said. And I think it first starts off with truly embracing the Safer Cleveland ballot initiative to ensure we have an independent civilian review oversight board to rebuild that trust, to ensure we can eradicate the bias and the racism and get the cultural change we need in our police department. Secondly, we have to do a better job of recruiting officers who reflect the lived experiences of our residents across every neighborhood. It's so important that they have that lived experience to ensure that when folks are walking the beat and seeing their officers, they know them by their first name. My grandma was the president of our neighborhood watch club, and she had a strong relationship with her commander at the time. It's that type of engagement we got to bring back to our city to restore those bonds between the residents and our police department.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you. You know, my good friend, Zach Reed, said something that he's been saying this for the past 10 years. That's exactly the problem. We've been saying the same thing year after year after year after year, and we're still in the same situation. You have to have a leader that's connected to the people, that understand the pain and the joys of the community. You know, I heard someone say, we got to get rid of racism. Racism is not going anywhere. What we have to do is be a system that doesn't protect those who bring their racism to their workplace. That's what we have to be. And how do we bring that trust between CPD and the people? One of the things that is very important to me is being connected to the people. I don't want to be a mayor. I will not be a mayor that is just sitting behind a desk. I want to be out there on the basketball courts, in the classrooms, making sure that people feel that they can trust their leader and that there's someone who cares about their trauma. I want to create an office of grief and condolences so that when our residents are dealing with pain and struggle because of murder or any other trauma, that we have an office that deals with them and doesn't just let them heal or go through the pain by themselves. And CPD must have a leader that appreciates them, appreciates the work that they're doing, and appreciate the fact, and that's what we did in Ward 7, whether it's donuts with a cop or walking the streets with the community, because they need to be connected with the community, and the community needs to be connected with them. Because just like they're fighting crime, people in the community don't want criminals either. We all feel the same way. But when I call 911, I'm calling 911 for help, not calling 911 to be harmed. So this is extremely important, understanding the pain and trauma of the people. But let me say this in closing. We can't just talk about the bad things that young people are doing. There's a lot of young people are doing a lot of amazing, amazing things. And we have to get into the habit of highlighting young people who are doing great work and not just highlighting those young people that are doing wrong. The question is who can reach the people? And I think I've shown that I can.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
Let me first of all say I was elected 4 times or served 17 years on Cleveland City Council. So that alone shows that I'm connected to the community itself. But when you talk about what we need to be doing, we got to fully fund and implement a real community policing program in the city of Cleveland. When I first became a councilman, my office was shared by police officers in many police stations. We need to bring back the many police stations. The former safety director, and he was the former chief, banned the many police stations in our community because he believed that everything should come out of downtown. I'm a neighborhood boy. I've been a councilman in the neighborhood. I've walked in the neighborhood. I've been in the neighborhood. The people in the neighborhood are used to seeing me walk up and down the street in the neighborhood. They want to see police officers walking up and down the streets. They want their many police stations back in their wards, in their communities, and in their neighborhoods. And if we do those things, embrace real community police, fully fund real community police, I will guarantee you, you will see violence in this city drop dramatically.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich.
Thank you. Councilman Reed, you're spot on. as and aligned, I see, with Senator Williams about community-based police patrol. When I was at the Juneteenth event this past week, the event on the mall, I talked to citizens from across Cleveland, and this community-based policing came up again and again. Police must know the neighborhood they're working in. They must be known by people in the community. And I intend to help facilitate that process because I've always been close to the streets. We have to work together to reduce crime. And as mayor, I want to say that I'll be consulting with the CPP and those who work with you so that we can set a direction for safer neighborhoods. We need more and better trained police. I'm committed to hire 400 new police, 100 safety assistants trained in mental health and social work to answer nonviolent calls, but to reinstitute the community-based policing, which will be central to have that kind of communication and contact to build the trust that we all understand is implicit in helping to heal the divide, which right now separates us unnecessarily.
Thank you. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. We have to stop talking about community policing as just an academic exercise or something that might work. We know what works. The mini stations were gone by the time I was a member of council, but the residents still remember them and they know what it was like to have that proximity to the police officers. I am fortunate that in the 2nd District, we have a robust community services unit of the Division of Police, where my office can call a CSU officer and they're off radio and they'll respond directly and quickly to quality of life issues. And that's what we need to make sure that every police district has. Many stations has a high functioning community service unit. And we have to make sure that our officers are doing those things that we know works. I've been fortunate enough to accompany 2nd District officers on foot patrols and bike patrols. And when the citizens see you walking and talking, not because there's anything wrong, but because you're seeking input from them of how are things on the street? How do you feel about your city? We have certain calls for service. Did you notice? They appreciate it and they feel connected, and then they start reaching out our next time around. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Question 9 will be asked by Commissioner Terry Eccles. It will be answered in the following order: Justin Bibb, Sandra Williams, Bashir Jones, Ross DeBello, Dennis Kucinich, Kevin Kelly, and Zach Reed. Justin Bibb, you're up.
Well, since I've been a candidate for mayor, I've traveled nearly every ward in the city, have hosted nearly 90 plus meet and greets, and have done over 120 plus one-on-one meetings. And the one thing I've learned consistently is that a one-size-fits-all approach does not apply to policing and many different issues across our community. And I think it's important for the next mayor to work directly with every commander across all 5 police districts to create a neighborhood-based plan that reflects the distinct issues and challenges of every part of our community. And those community service officers and community engagement officers must have a line of communication with my police chief, with my safety director, and with me as mayor and the council person that represents that ward. It's that all hands on deck approach we need to ensure we restore trust between our police and our residents, but also to make sure we have a data-informed approach that reflects the unique challenges to ensure we are doing everything we can to keep every neighborhood safe and secure and prosperous throughout the city of Cleveland.
For me, it's all about.
Excuse me, Senator Williams.
Yes.
I screwed up. My fault, you'll get your chance. I failed to ask Commissioner Eccles to ask his question. I apologize to my colleague, Commissioner Eccles, and to Mr. Bibb and Senator Williams. Please go ahead, Terry.
No problem. Thank you, Commissioner Katz. I appreciate that. Good to see so many of you that we talked to before out on the campaign. So here's my question. There's 17 wards in Cleveland, each of which demonstrates its own distinctive set of public safety challenges. How will you create and implement effective policy and police practices that are well-defined, structured, and consistent, but also vary enough to meet the appropriate needs of each individual ward? Thank you.
In all fairness, we'll start with Mr. Bibb again.
As I said before, I knew the question, so that's good. I knew it already, right? I've traveled all across the city, and I've learned that every community is different and requires a data-driven approach to ensure we're addressing the root cause of crime that reflects those characteristics. And that's what I intend to do. That's what I intend to do as the next mayor.
Thank you.
Yep.
Senator Williams.
Thank you. In law enforcement, we have a basic obligation to protect and to serve. That is what we are here for. And service in one ward may be different than service in another ward. And I think the way we find out what residents in a certain ward want is to do the most basic thing, to go out and talk to them directly about what is important to them in their region. When I'm out knocking on doors, if I'm in Ward 1, they're talking about something different. If I'm in Ward 4, it's a totally different conversation. If I'm over in Ward 11 or Ward 12, totally different conversation. So I think the individuals within that community need to help us define what's important for them, whether it's picking up their leaves or whether it's having officers at the schools when their children get out. It's all different, and we should formulate a plan based on the needs of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you. And that's the benefit of having an activist as the mayor, you know, someone who's not going to be stuck in City Hall, and someone who, when you see our city, we don't call it a butthole city, man. We recognize that our city is the greatest location in the nation. It's extremely important. But every neighborhood has its own understanding, has its own culture, from Little Italy to Huck, to Collinwood to Cam's Corner. And that's why it's important that we have people who are officers and who are commanders who understand the culture of the community in which they're serving. It's very dangerous to have officers who are culturally incompetent, who don't understand the people that they're serving. Very important. They should know the churches and the pastors. They should know that, you know, little Ray, he has some other issues, and maybe if we understand that, maybe just sending him home was a better thing to do rather than arresting him. You have to understand the neighborhoods. Even though we are one Cleveland, we are so rich in diversity and in culture. And this is why we must recruit and do a better job of not only recruiting, but retaining officers that come from Cleveland and understand Cleveland. I think this is very, very important. I know this is very, very important if we're going to move our city forward.
Thank you. Mr. DeBell.
So I personally think Ward 3 has a bigger ratio of police presence than the other wards, especially the further away you get from downtown. Myself and other Ward 17 neighbors have had 48-hour wait times for police requests, and my volunteer in Ward 1 has told me of the same. I think a reallocation is necessary. I think the answer lies within a mixture of reapportioning some downtown officers, looking at adjusting the 5 districts and new age mini stations. As far as policy and practice, those should be consistent across the city, but maybe we want more mental health responders in area of higher brain damage from lead paint poisoning. A focused deterrence approach to reducing crime is going to require different relationships and modes of communication in different parts of the city. If you're in a certain ward or pocket, you need the culture. This includes understanding certain norms and dialects and more translation ability.
Thank you. Congressman Kucinich.
It's true that there are similarities between wards, but there's also diversity differences that police department has to be sensitive to. That's why we need a community-based approach to law enforcement. It's absolutely imperative. Community-based also is, ward sensitive. and we need more police. I've said before, and I'll say it again. I want 400 new policemen, and I want 100 additional safety assistants who will be skilled in social work and mental health and answer those calls that don't require armed response. We can have safer neighborhoods, and the police can work with the community to do so, and we need to do that. Now, as mayor, I'm certainly going to understand the concerns of Clevelanders who want to be able to walk the streets safely. You don't have to worry about their children being shot at, who can go to a local gas station not worried about getting shot. And it's true that some neighborhoods are being overrun by crime, and we have to get the police on the street, in the neighborhoods, talking to people, working with the people, being mindful of the imperative of civil liberties, and at the same time, being effective crime prevention assets to our community.
Thank you. Council President Kelly.
Thank you. Policing has to be tailored to the neighborhoods that are being served. Every neighborhood, every street, every person needs to count, and their opinion needs to count. Senator Williams made references, and I think that she's absolutely right. It starts with talking to people. It starts with being on the ground. That's why the things that we do in the 2nd District in terms of having community relations meetings, having foot patrol, bike patrol, talking to people and just understanding what their needs are is so important. And again, as I found out in my listening tour, crime and safety is the #1 concern in every neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. But every neighborhood has its own nuance in terms of what they expect from the Division of Police. And we will have a tailored approach where every neighborhood will receive the level of policing, the type of policing that is tailored to that community, and every neighborhood will count, and we are going to make sure the community policing is just that.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
Thank you. See, that's the problem. Let me tell you, wards are different. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But policing doesn't have to be different. I mean, when Ms. Jones calls the police, she doesn't care when that police officer comes, whether he's Black, white, or Latino. She wants that police officer to come and treat her and her family with dignity and respect. And that's what's got to happen here. I agree with the congressman. First of all, we got to have community-based policing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the reason we've got a commission in place is because we didn't have constitutional policing. So I don't care if you're in Ward 17 in West Park. I don't care if you're in Ward 3 downtown. I don't care if you're in Ward 1 in Mount Pleasant. I want my police officers to patrol those streets constitutionally and respect the people no matter where you are in the city of Cleveland. I don't want to see different policing. I want to see constitutional policing first and foremost. If we get that type of policing, then this commission will guide us to where we need to be. That's what we need in Cleveland.
Thank you, sir. Question 10 will be asked by Commissioner Mayel Ngemba.
Thank you everyone for being here with us. We appreciate your time. Also, as a member of the refugee community and the president of the largest refugee community that is growing in Cleveland, here is my question. If elected as mayor of Cleveland, how would you bridge the hostility and the language gap between the CPC and the immigrant and refugee community?
Thank you, Mayel. That question will be answered in the following order. Ross DeBello, Dennis Kucinich, Kevin Kelly, Zach Reed, Justin Bibb, Sandra Williams, and Bashir Jones. Mr. DeBello.
So I do not know what trainings and bridge buildings are currently being done, but I would first inquire with local organizations such as Building Hope in the City and Refugee Response to inform my process. I'd make it known to all departments, communities, and the public that we are a sanctuary and a welcoming city. I'd hire translators to try and expand the budget and fight for funding for these purposes. I'd look to other progressive sanctuary cities to see what they are doing and what we aren't, even try and innovate. This is still the melting pot, still a safe haven to come and flee from oppressive places. And if that were to cost me politically, so be it. I would also consult with local veteran immigration and defense attorneys and the Muni and Common Pleas courts to see where they believe CDP can improve and why. We need more than just Spanish interpreters. We need Arabic, Puerto Rican dialect, sign language folks, and we may need to get creative and offer financial incentives to really make the progress an on-staff reality.
Thank you, sir. Congressman Kucinich. Congressman Kucinich. I think we've lost him. Councilman Kelly.
Thank you very much. This is just a great question, and I distinctly remember the day that I met with legal aid and discussed the fact that the city of Cleveland did not have an active language access plan. And I remember working very closely with members of the legal aid community, with Global Cleveland Refugee Response, to craft a language access plan that recognized our 7 most frequently spoken languages in the city of Cleveland. And putting together a policy was one thing. The hard thing was the training all public-facing employees in the language access plan, including the Cleveland Division of Police, to make sure that all of the residents that are members of our great city were able to communicate with the public-facing services that we provide. This is a very important value to me. This is something I will continue to push. This is something that I think we need to do and continue to do to build a city of Cleveland, a city hall, a community that is welcoming to all.
Thank you. Councilman Reed.
Mr. Katz, I see Mr. Kucinich is back. I don't know if you want him to answer it first or you want me to go forward.
We'll get to him.
Okay. Well, I think how we achieve what the questionnaire asked is, first of all, we do it by recruiting. Secondly, we do it by hiring. And then thirdly, we do it by training in those immigrant and refugee communities. We got to get them to know that we need them on the front line as police officers in the city of Cleveland. And we need to hire more translators. I believe if we did that, it would help be able to bring more immigrants and more refugees into the safety forces, because we clearly need them to help us to make this a safer city.
Thank you. Justin Bibb.
Without a doubt, we have so much work to do throughout the city to become a more welcoming city for our immigrant and refugee community. Firstly, we should be translating all pertinent information within the Cleveland Police Department to support our immigrant and refugee community. Secondly, I think it's critical that we have immigration liaison officers that reflect the broad, diverse cultural assets of our community and embed them inside the department to truly be on the front lines, to be of support to those communities all across our city. But it starts at the top by having a culture that's going to prioritize and leverage and elevate diversity for all of our residents. And we need that cultural change now more than ever throughout the city of Cleveland.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Thank you. When I was a probation officer on the west side of Cleveland, I had a lot of Spanish-speaking families on my caseload. And although I took Spanish in college, sometimes I didn't really understand. One of the ways we address that issue is by having people who were bilingual in our probation department that can go out with me so that I better understand what's happening and what the family is saying. I would do the same thing as the mayor of the city of Cleveland. I would make sure we had people trained in every language and that were prepared to go out with law enforcement officers so that they know and understand what the person is trying to say. We saw an incident in another country, another state last year about a police officer just not understanding what a young man was trying to say, and he ended up dead. So that's the first thing, more bilingual staff. members, law enforcement officers to go out to better understand cultural competency, to make sure we're understanding that culture, and just making sure the staff are aware when they go out not to take any quick moves because it just may be that language barrier. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
My friend Zach, man, he used to get away with saying anything in the campaign, but not this campaign, man. Not this one, brother. You know, you said something that I have to address, which actually followed up perfectly with this. And as a person that can speak and understand multiple languages, it's very, very important who shows up at your front door when you call 911. It's very, very important who shows up. Can you understand the language? And not just language in regards to Spanish or Arabic or Swahili, but also do you understand the culture of the people that you are dealing with? That's also a language as well. It's extremely important. And if it was constitutional, how policing would happen, there would be no CPC. So obviously the Constitution is not being followed at all. So what we have to do is we see very, very clearly within City Hall and within policing that we are not speaking, we are not even listening to people. In my neighborhood, I have the largest Asian population in Asia Town in the city of Cleveland. And what did I do? I stood up for our Asian brothers and sisters who was receiving hatred towards their businesses. I heard their voices. And we have to make sure that we're having officers that reflect every aspect of the community. And at least if we don't have that, at least we should have the languages where people can know that their voices are being heard. I have blocks and blocks in my community of people who don't speak English. I mean, come on, we don't even prepare. Spanish is the fastest growing language in the country, and yet and still we are not even prepared for that. City Hall continues to fail our community and doesn't hear their voices. We don't even hear the voice of the English speakers, let alone the voices of anyone else.
Thank you. Senator Williams has to leave our session now. We thank you for joining us tonight. Congressman Kucinich, you're up. You're muted. You're still muted.
Thank you. I've lived in multiple Cleveland neighborhoods, east and west, in my lifetime. Most of my life I've spent in very diverse communities. I was a councilman in an area where people spoke over a dozen different languages. Years ago, as a member of city council, I was instrumental in causing Cleveland police to have to carry a card with them and read the Miranda rights in Spanish. Usted tiene el derecho a permanecer en silencio. Why did I do that? Porque yo creo que los Latinos Americanos son ciudadanos muy importante al futuro de la ciudad de Cleveland. We need to work to bridge the gap between languages and City Hall. Now, today we have technology which can make it possible and easier to communicate across culture, across languages. Councilman Jones makes a point about culture, but Cleveland police need to be equipped and trained in using things like Google Translate. You can go, and many of us have traveled to other countries where we've used that to communicate with people, and sometimes in difficult circumstances. We can train people. There are ways today with new technology to bridge some of the language gaps. But the culture issue, this is where police need to be more trained. And if police are going to go into a particular community and they're working, they have
time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lou, you're muted.
I apologize. I'm asking the last question. In its review of the Cleveland Division of Police's use of non-lethal force during and immediately after the May 30 demonstration. The monitoring team informed the court, quote, "The monitoring team is concerned about the pattern of reporting and review of the use of force cases from May 30 and 31, which appear wholly inconsistent with division policy and the requirements of the consent decree." We are now just gentlemen left, so this will be answered in the following order. Congressman Kucinich, Councilman Kelly, Councilman Jones, Mr. Bibb, Mr. DeBello, Councilman Reed. My question is, if you had received that report, what would you have done?
Well, if I was the mayor at the time, we wouldn't have been in that mess. It's my understanding that the police command did not transmit orders through the ranks requiring the use of force. That was wrong. As mayor, I'm going to insist that such documentation always be obtained. And I want to say that the consent decree, we still have some work to do on that. And I look forward to working with the commission and others to make sure it's followed. The biggest concern of people right now in the city of Cleveland is crime. And we cannot effectively deal with crime unless we deal with all aspects and crime prevention. You know, yes, I want 400 new police. Yes, I want 100 new safety assistants to deal with mental health and social work issues. But we have to have a responsive and responsible police department, well-educated, well-trained, well-equipped, and ready to be of service to the people of Cleveland. Let's be clear about this. It is the mayor who sets the direction. It is the mayor who sets the tone. And if the police chief doesn't do the job, you have to put it on the mayor, because that is the top commander. And so I'm fully prepared to be the next mayor of Cleveland. And I look forward to working with all of you if I am elected. And if not, I'll be happy to work with the next mayor to set a new direction for law enforcement in our community. Thank you.
Councilman Kelly.
Thank you. The events of May 30 and 31 were indeed tragic, and we can spend a lot of time looking at where the failures occurred, the failures in communication between both within Cleveland Division of Police, with the county, and all of the other coordination that didn't happen. But your question was specific to the issue of reporting. And to me, this is the fundamental component of what we're trying to do here. It's a matter of transparency and accountability. What happened shouldn't have happened, but it did. But now the public has a right to know what happened and why. And if those reports are not being filled out, that's how the public gets to know. That's how we learn about things. And that's why any officer who did not follow the protocol, if the body cam was turned off, if the reports were not done according to policy, that those people would be held accountable if I were mayor. Transparency, accountability. That's what failed in the example that you raised, and that's why we're here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
You know, what you saw was an example of being disconnected from the streets. Anyone would have told you that was about to happen. The protest was going to happen. My fraternity brother, Mayor Ras Baraka in Newark, New Jersey, he was out there walking with the people. I would have been with the people marching, because the murder of George Floyd affected every last one of us as a community. No matter if you're Black, you're white, you're Hispanic, or Asian, no matter where you come from as an American, as a human being, we all felt it. So as mayor, I would have sat the activists down and said, what do we need to do to make sure that your voices are heard? But at the same time, we understood that the people who were coming in causing all of the violence were not necessarily Clevelanders. There were people who were coming outside of the city who was causing those issues. So we would have made it very clear that we're not tolerating bricks going through our windows. We're not tolerating any of these type of issues. But as activists, what can we do to make sure that your voices are being heard? So in regards to that, we would have been proactive. I would have been at the march, making sure that everyone was safe and sound. And we have to make sure that we show the community that their voices are heard, are respected, are appreciated. And guess what? Even if people want to protest against who I am or whatever, everyone has a right to protest. But when you harm the protesters, that's the big problem. But when you're disconnected from the community and disconnected from reality, then these are the type of things that happen.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bibb.
I want to applaud my dear fraternity brother, Councilman Jones, because I probably would have been marching with him as well at the protest. And I was marching at the protest to fight for the racial and economic and social justice that George lives deserves and that many Black lives in this country deserve during last year's protest. But at the same time, what we saw and what we continue to see is a lack of accountability and a clear lack of transparency inside our police department. That's why endorsing the Safer Cleveland Ballot Initiative is so important in this election to ensure that our residents get the justice, the transparency, and the accountability they deserve. As a candidate for mayor, I was the first to endorse it. We've shown the courage to lead on day one, and our residents can't afford to wait any longer. Now is the time to have the real accountability, and it starts by having a truly independent civilian review oversight board on the ballot come this November and this year's election.
Thank you. Mr. DeBello.
I would do the most thorough investigation I could, and if we found bad faith practices of reporting, we would consider all disciplinary options, including termination. I believe that's exactly what the consent decree orders. We serve the voters and taxpayers, and people are fed up with the lack of transparency and uses of excessive force. We need a different culture in policing that will genuinely be about honesty and reconciliation. The public knows that policing is hard, and the George Floyd protests were very tough to navigate, but what really crushes credibility is dishonesty and blind loyalty. The May 30th appearance of impropriety set us further back. People don't want to get caught for mistakes, so it sounds like the information was not forthcoming. The policy can't be cover your ass. It's got to be an apology, assessment, and yes, then discipline for having the pants down. We can't compound problems. It's crushing credibility and having significant others ask each other if they really want to be a police officer in this atmosphere.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Reed.
Thank you very much. When someone says, if I would have been mayor, I would have been at the march. If I was mayor of the city of Cleveland, I would have been at the march. Well, first of all, I was at the march, and I wasn't an elected official, and I wasn't mayor. I was at the peaceful part of the march. My stepson and I, we went to the front lines when the protesters were hollering and screaming and doing what protesters do, right on the front steps of Justice Center. And then all of a sudden, tear gas started coming from everywhere. And the tear gas got in my eyes, and it got in his eyes. And now it started off as a peaceful protest, turned into chaos because police officers weren't following their own policy. So as mayor of the city of Cleveland, I wouldn't have had to see the report because I was there. I would have saw what happened firsthand. So when the report came to me, I would immediately ask for an outside independent investigator to investigate why would police not follow their own policy as it relates to what was happening out there on that day. And then once that review was finished, we would look at it, we would evaluate it, and if police officers stepped across the line and didn't follow their policy, they would be held accountable. That's what's got to happen. I've been out on that front line. I've been out in those communities. I've walked in those neighborhoods. So it was nothing for me to walk out there in that peaceful protest that day and see firsthand how police officers knew what the policy was, knew what they should have been doing, and they chose not to follow their own policy, and therefore outside independent investigator should have been holding them accountable. And if I was mayor of the city of Cleveland, they would have been held accountable.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. And so we come to the end of the forum. We all know that the Cleveland consent decree and police reform are in terrible trouble tonight. We can only hope that the problem will be corrected to the satisfaction of the communities that have advocated and worked so hard for police reform in Cleveland, and the families who have suffered losses from police violence. There are 3 vacancies currently on the Cleveland Police Commission. If you are a resident or work in the city, you can apply to join the commission, but you'd better hurry because applications are due in 2 weeks. For information how to apply for the volunteer commissioner positions, consult the commission website, clecpc.org. Thanks to all 7 candidates for their participation in the forum. Hopefully their answers help you, the voters, make your decision when you cast your vote in the primary. The 2 candidates who get the most votes in the primary will go head to head in the November election. So your vote is very important. Please be sure to vote, and thank you and good night.